Wait a minute. This says season finale up there? That can't be right. This season has flown by, JB. What's going on here?
Yeah, hey, Frank, all good things must come to an end. And although it's been our 10th season of covering D3 football, particularly in the northeastern part of the country, um, it was kind of a season of firsts on many levels for us here at in the now D3 football or D3FB Huddle. And we'd like to thank all the fans and the families, the players, all these new folks who've joined us this season. Because even though we've you know been doing this for a while, this was definitely a season of first. Number one, the fact that we covered all 9 East Region conferences. In the past, we were primarily a Liberty League show, although we did do the East Region review in the last couple years. But we really expanded it out to cover everything from Bangor, Maine, all the way down to Frostburg, Maryland. And it's been great getting to know a lot of the players, coaches, and administrators across the entire Eastern region. And, tip of the cap to you, Frank. This use of video technology and conferencing for the interviews has really changed the scope of the show. I think it's been great for fans and other folks throughout the country to see these players in person, to kind of get to know us a little bit, as goofy as we are. And credit to you. And, you're always on the road. Now you're in Salem, Virginia. You're going to be on the sidelines for the Stagg Bowl Friday night. I think kickoff's around 7 p.m. Although the pre-show on D3Football.com starts at 5. So if you want to catch that, I would definitely recommend that. Better coverage than you'll see at ESPN. Maybe turn your TV on, but keep your headset in for the audio of Pat, Keith, and Frank calling the game. But you traveled a lot this year, Frank. You went down to Montclair, New Jersey. You went to I think Kings Point and Springfield, to Troy, New York. You were all over the place. Delaware Valley. I mean, where didn't you go, Frank? So I think the fact
Wait,
that we were
Belton,
able
Texas.
to,
Come on, man. Belton, Texas.
I was saving the best for last, Frank. You even took to the air to get to some of these games. So credit to you. I wish I had the ability to go to some of these games. One of these years, I'll do that. I am wearing my purple for the Stagg Bowl, trying to do what I can. And then, one of the things that was really fun this season too, because of this video technology, is we were able to do some postseason bowl like reveal shows. We got some scoops, and at the end of the day, we did our best to try to cover all the good, and sometimes we had to touch on some of the bad. But that goes with football. Controversy makes for some good news. So. Even though we're not journalists per se, we do our best to try to keep things as objective as possible, because that's what we do in our day jobs. And me in the banking world, Frank, as an attorney. So it's been a lot of fun. Our first little sort of pivot here in the season finale, we want to bring in a special guest. We had a number of new friends on the show this season, but we had some old ones too, including the godfather of In the Huddle, Eric Wren, which is a lot of fun to catch up with him and sort of talk shop like we used to in the good old days. But one of our younger colleagues, Matt Noonan, kind of surprised us with a sort of a pro-retirement announcement. We had a great season with him, going back and forth about Division III football in the Northeast. He's had his Noontime Sports blog for about 8 years now. He does weekly top 10 rankings of the best teams in New England. He does podcasts. I've joined him on a couple of those over the season. Lots of different stuff, but he's starting to make a pivot in his life. He's a young guy. He's trying to maybe do some new and different things. I don't think we've seen the last of him, Frank, but we at least wanted to give him the floor, given all the collaboration we've done back and forth this season. So here's our conversation with Matt Noonan of Noontime Sports on what he's going to be doing going forward as far as D3 football and other D3 sports are concerned.
Okay, so James, we got to bring in this guy one more time this season. It would not be a season finale show without him. And he goes and decides to one-up us, I think, with the season finale with some news on Facebook yesterday. But first things first, Matt Noonan, welcome back to In the Huddle, sir.
Gentlemen, it's always a pleasure, and it's always football season when I speak with you guys. So I don't care. We could play football in April, and there's always something to talk about with you guys.
Well, we're playing football
That's
here
true.
for a couple more days at least in Salem, Virginia, but you're not down here with us, so come on, man. We'll get you down to Texas next year. Show the shirt. Go ahead. Show your shirt.
Go Longhorns, baby.
There you go.
So what's going on, Matt? What's going on? First, let's talk about New England and your thoughts about the entire New England D3 football community over this last season. Jordan Wilcox and his teammates were behind me in a photo earlier today. We're recording this on Wednesday, obviously. Earlier today, his teammates and he were striking a pose on the Gagliardi stage. We don't know if he's won yet or not, obviously, but early in the show, I'm sure we've discussed this already. But I mean, beyond that, and John Smith being nominated as a semifinalist, give me your overall take on the New England D3 football world.
Well, I think this year we definitely saw Frank and James. We definitely saw it get more competitive. I think that, seeing the Plymouth States of the world, I mean, they emerged really last year. I mean, they were the story, I think, last year. The 9 games, the NESCAC, having it come down to the final week with, Trinity kind of scoreboard watching when they played Wesleyan and Amherst and Williams. I mean, Amherst was coming off a big win and beat Trinity, and then they end up losing, So I think, and then also I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Husson. Obviously, those guys have been big fans of the site, and I appreciate all the comments and input they always provided. And I think Husson is a couple of coaches I've talked to recently. Really is a program that you can't really take lightly. I know that they're up there in Bangor, Maine, and I'm here in Somerville, Massachusetts, right next to Cambridge and Boston. And so for me, that's a 3-hour-and-a-half commute. But from coaches I've talked with and, kind of watching them and the run they went on this particular season, putting up 15 points against Del Val. I know Western New England was shut out. They're going to be a fun story to watch in the offseason. How do they recover without John Smith? John Smith was our New England player, the offensive player of the year. Max Chipperos down at Trinity could be the player that New England fans and coaches and players will be talking about next year. But I think it was a really interesting year. I mean, you had some new conferences with the NUMAC and the CCC, and some of the Liberty League teams obviously transitioning into them, and some really interesting non-conference games here too. So, but I think all in all, I think this was a pretty exciting year for coverage, and we definitely saw a lot of teams emerge that we haven't talked about in a long time.
Matt, you mentioned a couple of the, some of the New England teams like Husson. Eventually, they are going to be switching over to the CCC, which was one of several Eastern Conference title races that kind of came down to the final, weeks of the season. Once you kind of take a step back and you think in another year or so, you could have Western New England, Salve, Husson, Curry, all in the same conference. It does seem to bode well for the future of New England football, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And then University of New England also is going to be in it, I believe, next year if I have this correct. So they've got the former Becker coach who's going to go oversee them. I know they played a lot of JV games this year, and they were very active on social media. I think that conference could be really interesting to watch. And then you have a new coach over at Endicott too, with McGonigal coming over from Assumption, who's got experience under Coach J.B. Wells, who's now at Bowdoin, as we all know. So that conference is going to be really interesting to watch. I mean, Curry was another team that I probably should have mentioned about when Frank asked me about some of the state of New England. I mean, Curry's going to graduate, Alex Corvesi and all these other players too. But, they were a fun story too. And I'm interested to see, can Nichols possibly, I think on paper, I had them pegged as probably more the middle of the pack. I'm interested to see how they perhaps can respond. But Salve Regina is a team that I think we didn't see kind of, the finish that they would have. I know they kind of got off to a really good start and then kind of fizzled out down the stretch. But I think the CCC could be really interesting to watch here, definitely going forward. Now, I'm interested too, I think also, with the NUMAC, with, you got the 3 contenders from the Liberty League with the Merchant Marine, WPI, and with Springfield. Look, all 3 programs are going to lose some key players, but next year might be WPI's year. They just got to get a quarterback and a couple of pieces, and I think that WPI could be really a team to look out for. And that when you have Sean McGowan for. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
With all due respect to our friend Rusty Egan, WPI was probably the best team we didn't talk about that much this season. They kind of had, quietly, behind the scenes, racked up 9 wins. Only 2 losing, one of the New England Bowls, one of the teams that you cover too, Matt. I know Framingham State.
Right.
They lost a close call to Plymouth, which ultimately cost them the MassTech title, but they ended up 10-1. They had a couple of All-American, All-Region players on their squad. And another team that we sort of picked up on a little late was Worcester State. They had that tight end who was named a first-team AFCA All-American, if I got that right. But that was a great year for New England. A lot of strides made, and I think they're catching up with the New York and New Jersey schools, as we saw early on.
Can I interject
one
question,
without a doubt.
I want to interject. You brought up Paul McGonigal, I think it is, over at Endicott. What's your take? What are you hearing about what happened there exactly with the Kevin DeWall situation? I mean, from the looks of it, McGonigal was announced 2 days after Assumption played their last game, which would also indicate to me that there was no official search done, and they pretty much had made the decision at some point prior to the end of the season at Endicott, which won their last 2 games of the year. What are you hearing about what the chain of events were and how it played out ultimately to the degree that you can, tell us? And are you surprised by how it played out?
Sure. I think the first thing I just would say, Frank, I mean, unfortunately, I apologize for text messages going off. I think, unfortunately, I haven't really heard too much. I mean, like I said, I'm switching gears into basketball, so I know that their basketball team's off to a good start here too. And I'm actually, I'll give you guys a little bit of a plug. I'm actually going to be having Coach McGonigal on my Football Friday podcast for this coming week. So for all your fans who want to get to know a little bit more about Coach McGonigal and who he is and kind of the goals and the outlooks he has for a program that he's familiar with before transitioning into the D2 world, where he had a lot of success with another former D3 coach in Bob Chesney, who I think has done a fantastic job, not only when he was at Sally Regina, but also now with Assumption. As far as the response, and unfortunately, I don't really have anything I glued, unfortunately, guys. But I think that I think for Endicott, I think it's an exciting time. I'm sure we'll see what is to bring. I think the thing that I'm more interested, guys, here is looking at is that Coach DeWall brought in some really interesting recruits, and Zach DeNike was one of the players that I really enjoyed watching down the stretch. And if you look at his numbers, just like from his freshman year to his sophomore year, the transition, and they're going to have his backends. So I'm more intrigued to kind of watch some of these players grow under a new system, see how that transition goes, and again. I'm interested to see where Endicott is headed. And I think this conference, like I said a few minutes ago, is going to be really competitive with when Husson joins. And I know UNE is probably an unknown, but I think it'll be interesting to definitely see how Coach McGonigal can. And again, he's coach number 3 of the program. So I think, Endicott will certainly be back in the equation before we know it.
So, Matt, if folks that are watching this are probably looking at the last 2 words of our description of you, covers New England D3 Sports in parens for now. What's that all about, my friend? What's going on with Noontime Sports?
Sure. So, first off, I want to thank you guys for, as always, the opportunity to come on, talk D3 New England football with you guys. I think what you guys do for the sport, I know it sounds cliche and probably a coach saying here or a student saying or an SID, but I think you guys bring you shed a great light on D3 sports and especially D3 football. And, I know you guys are predominantly Liberty League. I got to know you guys when I was, calling games with Rusty Egan for WPI. And I know this year it was a little bit of a different challenge and a little bit of a different monster with taking on more conferences outside of the Liberty League, with some of those teams transitioning into some of the New England conferences too, that we've obviously trying to hit home on throughout the season and that you guys covered here too. In regards to the announcement that came Facebook the other day here too, I'll say it this right now, which is I'm not going to be going away. I'm still here in Massachusetts. This is my home. New England is where I love, and this is where I grew up. And I'm fortunate to have a really good family, an amazing girlfriend who's a life partner, who I also am very lucky to call my best friend. But sometimes I got to just step away for a little bit. I'll still be a voice on Twitter. We'll still have Noontime running. It might be a little bit limited, but just, got to do a little bit of a pivot. But I look forward to hopefully, returning to the D3 football coverage come next fall.
So I got Pat Coleman from D3Football.com behind me, and I know he's a fan of your stuff, and you're a little bit sad to see his message yesterday.
Yeah, wish you well. I don't even know if that means you're not going to continue to write for D3 Hoops. I'm asking this question awkwardly on the air.
No, I'm fulfilling my winter commitments. I mean, that was the goal.
He's finishing the season out, definitely.
Oh no doubt. And
That was
we're
the
going
good.
to find the next. But
yeah, but nonetheless, come on,
man.
Matt, you're going to stick around at least a little bit. I have this funny feeling you're not going to completely give this up cold turkey. Yeah,
I don't think you'll see me
trust
leave.
me,
I mean,
you
like
can
I said,
never get away.
look, you know, what Pat has done and what you guys have done, I think is fantastic. And as someone that's worked in a couple of SID offices up here, I appreciate what you guys do. And you know, like I said, when I was just on the phone a little while ago with a D3 football coach, and you know, I told him about, you know, how appreciative of all, you know, everything that his program has done. And, you know, to be completely fair with you guys here as well, you know, you guys really did motivate me this particular, you know, this particular summer going into the fall. You know, I know that James and I have been, you know, have done a lot of podcasts, and James has been great. And Frank, one of these days you got to pay back the favor and come on. But I think, you know, you guys motivated me to really push harder. And the cross promotion really was great. I mean, the coverage you guys did was fantastic. It was great to have another outlet that was, you know, not only kind of, you know, working together, but also in a way kind of motivated me to say, hey, I got to push a little harder because here's these guys pushing hard, and you know, I'm 29 and they're
bunch
a
of
little
old
older, and
farts.
they're pushing hard. Yeah, I was gonna say, but you know, at the end of the day, it's a well-oiled machine, and you know, I don't think people are gonna, like I said, I know the news came as a shock. It's been something that's been on my mind and been something I've wrestled with, as I mentioned in that Medium post. But the response and the outpouring, my phone has been going off the hook. Obviously, text messages, phone calls, emails, Facebook messages. Obviously, talking to you guys. Pat, I know, had reached out to me too. But you know, you're gonna have to deal with me for D3 hoop season, and like I said, I'm not planning to go anywhere, but just making a little bit of a pivot, and but I'll still be around. And for all my fans on Twitter, they're still going to get the D3. They'll have to deal with some probably D3 lax tweets with Tufts and Bowden get together, or Bates as well. So just throwing that out there.
Gone but not forgotten, and not gone really is what I'm getting out of
Not
this.
really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just a little
Well, Matt,
sidestep for now, fellas. But I'm not, like I said, I mean, New England's my home. This is where I'm from, and you can count on me being back for coverage next year. I will go out on this program. And by the way, this is the first interview that I'm being conducted by this, so I am flattered that I get to give my voice here on in the Huddle D3 football, man.
JB, you know, I think we should give him some shout-outs aside from us and all the people he's listed so far. But this is the finale, and maybe the finale with you joining us. But you're back next year. You're so back next year. I'm sorry to tell you. So give us your shout-outs.
Well, I think I'll start off with this. Want to thank the Framingham State Athletic Department. I mean, they've been great with letting me to the PA announce their games. I'm going to give a shout out to my man, who was a colleague and friend. I know we just talked about his school, Endicott. Sean Medeiros does a great job as an SID. Rob Pilardi, those guys up there. They were always really good with, you know, promoting and retweeting everything too. I want to give a shout out also just to the NESCACs and all to the other schools here too. WPI deserves some love as well. Springfield was great. Big Quinn at Williams, sending him an email last minute when I was looking for some photos for our Coach of the Year and Rookie of the Year. So I just want to thank all of them. And like I said in that Medium post, I want to thank the fans, but I also want to thank you guys too, because it's, you know, working with people like yourselves that, you know, show the love for this. I mean, we do this for love, guys. I mean, you know that too. I mean, I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you know, we're not making the big bucks off of this. We're doing this because we love this. We're passionate about this. And when you get teams and schools and programs and coaches and players behind you, oh, thank you. There we go. Yep. You know, that actually came in the mail today, so thank you. But yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. So that's the way.
Keep looking for that check.
Well, guys, for now, let us bid our good friend Matt Noonan adieu, but we will continue to read your stuff for D3 Hoops and Noontime Sports as well, related to basketball, winter sports, and then from there on out, it's kind of, we'll see where it goes, I guess, at that point. Your girlfriend is an angel and a saint for dealing with you. We know that already, so send our best to her, and thanks for everything you've done with us and for us along the way. We do appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And I think I have to end it by saying, gentlemen, happy holidays, and may 2018 be a wonderful year too.
Yeah.
God bless.
For sure.
And that was our interview with Matt Noonan. Noonan is a great guy through and through. I told him next time I'm out that way in Massachusetts, dinner on me, because honestly, he's been a wealth of knowledge and information for us as we got used to this entire region, especially the Northeast, which was not really our wheelhouse, I guess is the word to use for our knowledge in D3 football. We're more or less a Liberty League show for 9 seasons, and then sort of broadened out. And yeah, we have a little bit of New England exposure back from when Springfield and WPI were in the Liberty League, but that was kind of it in a lot of ways. And he helped us immensely, and I think we'll continue to, but in a less official basis is the way I'm feeling it from that interview.
I think so. And he was really helpful as far as, trying to connect the dots for us on some of these New England programs that we saw, rising up. I mean, obviously we have a long-term relationship with WPI and Springfield and the Merchant Marine and the NUMAC. But for these other programs such as Framingham State and Plymouth State, some of those schools where we hadn't really had, Western New England, for instance, were one of the places that Frank did his playoff previews from. Matt was definitely helpful, getting us up to speed on those things. And when we look back on 2017, that kind of collaboration, that reaching out across the region was really what I think made this our best season ever. We had over or just about 20 student athlete guests on the show. We had roughly 15 coaches and or senior administrators from all the 9 conferences across the region, including, and this is our one of our sort of rah-rah points here that we try to do every year, is we had the opportunity to interview for the 10th season in a row the chair of the NCAA Division III Football Championship Selection Committee, Darla Kirby from the University of Mary Herm-Baylor. She's one of the associate athletic directors there. And while we maybe we caught a little flack for it was sort of being maybe not the most exciting interview, but the good news is that it was a really great bracket, so there wasn't a whole lot to nitpick and throw bombs at at poor Darla. I think they did a really great job, and as East Region fans, we were excited to see the grouping of 8 that we got. Frostburg got in this season when they didn't the year before with a similar record, and they had an awesome run. So it was a great year for the East Region. 23 teams in various postseason bowls, including the NCAAs. The ECAC bowls were great. The New England bowls were entertaining, as well as the Centennial MAC Bowl that happened. So lots of great stuff, a lot of great opportunities for teams to have some postseason experience, and we enjoyed that. According to our fans, though, your favorite guests were the following, and Frank, you can chime in as you see fit here. In no particular order, although I think we kind of knew who the number one, with the Secretary's Cup and all the Mariners and folks scattered around the world. Jake Murphy of the Merchant Marine had the most views of any student athlete that we interviewed, but maybe based on the number of appearances, Frank, you could say the aggregate, maybe the true number one goes to Joe Germanario, who I'm hoping we get to hear. Yeah, I hope we get to hear Joey G get his name called for the D3Football.com All-American team, which you're going to reveal tomorrow night, Friday, I believe between 5 and 7 p.m. Before kickoff for the Stagg Bowl. So make sure everyone to tune in for that. I think he had obviously a great season. He was the first team All East Region selection. Great year for him and the Brockport Golden Eagles. And probably if you add up the cumulative numbers of Brockport fans who tuned in this historic season for them, he probably ends up in the number one role. But we'll say it's a tie between him and Jake Murphy. Not far behind is another guy who's been getting tons of accolades. He was a first-team All-American from the AFCA. He was a first-team All-Region player, and John Smith. And then obviously Jordan Wilcox, who was one of the 4 Gagliardi finalists. An awesome bit of recognition for him and for the Springfield Pride, who had a great season. They went undefeated in NUMAC play. Got a little tripped up in the playoffs by John Smith and company from Husson, but you can't knock the fact that they were one of the top rushing offenses of the season. And more importantly, Jordan is just a great representative of what Division III athletics is really about. He was very involved with Team Impact and working with kids with pediatric cancer. Great
hold on.
GPA. Oh, okay. I'll
Time out.
turn it over to you.
Well, I'm just going to say, and for folks that don't realize where exactly I am, I'll broaden the shot for a second here. This is Salem Stadium. Mount Union has just finished practicing on their Thursday practice behind me. There's not much you gain from these practices, so the recording doesn't bother many people, so we appreciate nobody stopping us from doing this. There was nothing really to gain at the very end of that. So that being said, last night Jordan Wilcox was here, and so were 6 of his teammates. This is the first time we have ever had a Gagliardi finalist have an actual contingent come down, and they drove 10 hours to get here in Salem and spent a couple days down here with Jordan to support him. Jay Gagliardi and a whole bunch of others. It was just really nice to see it. Yeah, we've had occasions where we've had teams in this Stagg Bowl, and they've had finalists here, and that's a little bit different because they were already here, but to actually have guys come down was amazing. There's one thing I want to do, and I think you and I agree on this. The video for him during the Gagliardi Trophy ceremony was impressive, and you were just going to go down the accolades and everything. Let's let this video do the talking for us on what Jordan Wilcox has done in his career, especially this year. I like the honesty in it. Let's go to the video. As they say, let's go to the videotape, and then we will come back and talk about it briefly.
When I think of Jordan and the time he spent not only on the gridiron, but his pursuits and his opportunities outside of football with his community service and his work in the classroom, just thrilled to have Jordan in the mix here. And when you think about it in the context of having, across all Division III, there's got to be probably 25,000 student athletes and playing football, and to have a Springfield College student in the mix, the Final Four, just terrific. Really, really thrilled for Jordan.
What he meant to this team on the football side of things is remarkable, to be honest with you. I mean, as hard as he ran all year long, and as what he did for the offense, when people knew he was going to get the football quite a bit, and it was still hard to defend him, and he was making people miss. And I think a great team player makes everybody else better, and that's what he did. He made our offensive line better. He made our quarterback position better. He made our wide receivers better. So he had that ability to make everybody on this football team a better player.
This year was all about the team. It didn't matter if he ran for 300 yards like he did against Keene or whatever, or he ran for 84 and we beat WPI. It was whether we won or not, and that's all that mattered.
But I think he continued to get better as a person along the way as well, and that's what really allowed him to develop his game to the fullest potential, and that's what we saw this past year. And I think Jordan, he figured it out at some point, probably within the last year or so, how special he could be on and off the field, and then that's when he really took off as a player, and I think that's a direct result of how he's developed as a person.
But he works hard. He's always doing homework, and he's one of the kids that's like, he'll get his work done even if it's not due for 2 weeks.
He's got a great personality, obviously, and he's able to sell a lot of people with his personality side of things, and him and a couple other guys on the team actually won a Junior Achievement Award this past season for one of the models that they produced as far as a business plan goes. So he's excelled in the classroom all along, and I think the ability, obviously, to interact with people, especially on the business side of things, has helped him along throughout the course of the last 4 years, and I think that's definitely noticeable with probably some of his other professors that had an opportunity to talk to him about as well.
When I think of Jordan in the class, Jordan is always excited to come in class. Even on days we have tests, he's excited. He has this big smile on his face and has a great attitude. And that kind of attitude goes beyond Jordan and infects the rest of the class, I think, in a very positive way.
So we all have a really good relationship with Luke, but I think Jordan has a little bit more of a relationship than some of us do, and that comes from freshman year when we first met Luke. As soon as we first met Luke, he jumped on it. I think him and Luke have this special relationship where they are able to click and they motivate each other. So I think it's been good for him and good for Luke.
Jordan's one of the first people to come up to Luke whenever Luke shows up. It doesn't matter how intense the game is in that moment. They could be going through play adjustments or whatever it is, he'll see Luke and he'll immediately come over, to give him knuckles or give him a hug or whatever it might be. And he comes up continually, time and time again, and says, Luke, we're going to get another touchdown for you. We're going to get another touchdown for you. They were fortunate and that they had such a successful season. They were able to get a lot of touchdowns, and Jordan was a big part of a lot of those touchdowns. Jordan's always been somebody who's reached out to Luke, always somebody who's offered encouraging words, told him that he was going to crush it, told him that the biopsy would come out good, and then was one of the first people to ever, to embrace him every time he showed up.
We constantly talk to the guys about being selfless, and I think Jordan put it in great words at the burning of the old shoe this past year. As he said, when I was a freshman, I was selfish. I was more about myself and numbers and stats and everything. And through this program and what it's meant to me and the opportunities to interact with Luke Bradley and see the inspiration that he provides our team individually, collectively, I think he's just realized, and we always talk to our guys that, it's not perspective that we gain from this. It's the opportunity to establish empathy and selflessness and caring for others, not just about ourselves, through football, because the game itself teaches you a lot. But I think what it's taught Jordan over the course, especially over the course of the last year or two, is that empathy factor, is live for others as well. And I think that once you can start living for others, it's going to make your life that much better as well. And then I think it can release you to be the best possible person you can be. And we always, again, talk within this program that better people are going to become great players.
And that was the Springfield Athletics video for Jordan Wilcox that played at the Gagliardi Trophy show, the 2017 Gagliardi Trophy show last night here in Salem, Virginia. I liked the candor he had about when he came in as a freshman. He came in as kind of a selfish stats guy. He wanted to build up the stats and everything. And the maturity he grew, the selflessness he grew along the way, most of all seen with his relationship with Luke Bradley. But just overall, a lot of people I think look at Springfield at times and have doubts about the strength of it academically and the football team. They're just a bunch of dumb jock mentality. So untrue. First off, so untrue. They are a great school and getting better and better from everything I can tell. And then when you actually sit down and talk with Jordan, like Pat Coleman did last night, he was probably one of the best of the four interviews in terms of his ability to just articulate his points and everything else. And then to watch the video and see him give his presentations and everything else, he does take his academics very seriously, and congratulations to him. He deserved this accolade. Yes, he did not win. Brett Casper is the Gagliardi Trophy winner for 2017, but to be a finalist and the only East representative, only the third in the last 8 years as a finalist, it's incredible. It really is.
It really does say a lot to his character, not only just as his performance on the football field speaks for itself. I mean, he was one of the top 5 leading rushers in the country. And just the fact, he's a fullback. Brett Casper, was another great story, certainly very deserving candidate. And not surprising, I think, more than half of the 24 or 25 trophies that have been handed out by the J Club have gone to quarterbacks. These Player of the Year awards often do. So for a guy who plays in a position typically reserved for blocking, to have such a historic season to help lead his team to an undefeated record, and just to do so many things outside of the classroom, Jordan's definitely a winner in life, and will be very successful outside of his football career. And Frank, I think he might be the in the huddle Vinny Chase, with such an entourage that he brought down to Salem. He's the guy, right? So I think instead of Cardinal call him Jordan, I'm going to start calling him Vinny Chase. We're looking forward to hearing about all the success he's going to have, his post football career, and all you Eastern fans. And I'm pretty sure Springfield is going to be back with young guys like Hunter Belzo and others kind of waiting in the wings. They'll have their opportunity. So the pride will definitely be back. But like you said, Frank, quite an accomplishment for an East Region player to get invited. Says a lot, and that Jordan is definitely a winner in our book.
So, sir, I'm going to let you choose what's up next here. I kind of took a timeout on your list of our favorite interviews of the year. What else do we have to round up here?
Well, I was just going to rattle off some of the maybe like the top 5 or so key takeaways that I've had this season. And I'll kind of rattle them off, and you can either chime in as you like, or maybe wait to the end and have your own recap, or however you want to do this. But at the end of the day, we hear about from all these players, all these coaches, football is a week by week thing, and that's true to a certain extent. But it's also about not only how you finish, but it's also about how you start. And what we saw in 2018 is that there were some really big non-conference games in week one, going back to like right before Labor Day or thereabouts, that really set the table for the rest of the season. And what I'm speaking about specifically is Brockport beating Hobart. We saw Del Val beating Wesley, and Springfield beating Western New England for the pinch and saw rivalry game. And those 3 wins by each of those respective teams really did, help set them up on their path to successful seasons and playoff runs. So while we love to talk about the conference games and how everything runs through the Pool A or the automatic qualifier, and in the conferences, you can really start off a great season by having a big win in week one.
I want to say that it kind of is one of our points of pride here for us, is that we sort of zoomed in on those teams after those wins, and then Springfield beating Kane as well, I think, was another one that sort of kept the
that was a big
momentum
deal too.
Going there. Mm-hmm. And I really think that we were able to get ahead of the curve on this enough that it paid dividends as the season went on. We formed better relationships with schools that we weren't used to, like Brockport, like Del Val along the way, and a school that we already had a good relationship with from their Liberty League days in Springfield. But we didn't see this coming. We didn't see all 3 of those. Well, 2 of the 3 schools, I'd say. Del Val I thought was going to be Del Val. The MAC I thought might be stronger than it was this year, but it proved to be okay. But Del Val was the cream of the crop by far in that conference. But the other 2 schools didn't see 10-0 Springfield coming, didn't see 10-0 Brockport coming. But I'm glad that we saw the exclamation points early enough by them to jump on and begin to bring coverage of them. And hey, even RPI out there, a team that had some confounding, twists and turns through the season, but overall consistent positive football they played and challenged Wesley in the playoffs. And that started with non-conference play by them as well. And what we saw from them, I think, gave us some decent confidence about following them along the way and focusing on them a little bit more. We appreciate all their help along the way in giving us access and interviews.
Yeah, and that leads to my second takeaway, which really, led to these crazy finishes by, I think 5 of the 9 conferences came down to the last, couple of weeks. I mean, it was pretty clear in a few places that we had a sense of how things were going to play out, but the Liberty League, the Empire 8, the MAC, the NJAC, and the CCC, the Commonwealth Coast Conference, which was the new name for the former NEFC, basically kind of came down to week 10, week 9, 11 type games that were, there were tiebreakers and things like that we were, hadn't had to talk about in a few seasons. And it really made for an exciting finish to what was a really great 2017 year.
Agreed, and I think one thing that we pride ourselves on, we kind of piloted what was the Bracket Blitz show on D3Football.com by doing our Week 10 D3 Blitzer show. We called it at that point, and we knocked out a bunch of those Week 10 conference deciders and also underscored which ones were still alive for Week 11, which Week 10 was the most important week, I want to say, out of those 2 weeks. Because so many things happened. The Brockport win against Alfred, which was in doubt in the 4th quarter, especially when Joe G went down. And I think we gained enough perspective on the MAC race in that whole show as well. We didn't get to focus much on it, but Wesley winning and getting the NJAC crown essentially that day as well was a big thing for us to see and be a part of. That was just a great show for us. And like you said, for it to come down to the last 2 weeks as much as it did, was an incredible thing for those conferences. Even the NESCAC, the 9th conference that we don't talk about nearly as much, came down to Week 11 essentially, with the Week 10 asterisk about Trinity basically having a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah, no, it was interesting to see, and our friend Coach Raymond, formerly of St. Lawrence but now at Williams College, had sort of turned some heads when they when they had started winning some more games after going an over in his first year, lo and behold, their win over Amherst in the final week of the NESCAC season ultimately gave Trinity the championship after Amherst had upset them in Massachusetts the week before. So a lot of exciting stuff. And yeah, one of the things I should have called out at the top of the show, Frank, is that D3 Blitzer thing was something we've talked about for a few years now. I know it's been done by you and others to a certain extent on the D3 Hoops side of things, but it was really the first time that anything like that had ever been tried for Division III football, kind of like an NFL red zone type of thing. And there were times where we struggled a little bit with technical difficulties, but at the end of the day, those 4+ hours was really a first in Division III football history. So credit to you in kind of managing all that behind the scenes as the executive producer. I know it's something we've talked about, and it was great to actually pull it off. And I felt, at the end of the day, and the feedback we received from fans and elsewhere was really positive. And then, obviously you were able to recreate that in the playoffs with Pat Coleman and company with D3Football.com. And hey, we'll do it again next year.
Yeah, our good friend Brian McGoffin over at Springfield, the SID there, they called it D1 first class kind of stuff, essentially paraphrasing, but he gave us a note, particular to that show, and we appreciated that. It was enough for us to think that we could do the Bracket Blitz show, which we did 2 weeks later with even more technical difficulties, but overall more coverage than anything else, quad screening games, and people were amazed that we could quad screen playoff games, and thanks to the NCAA for providing that ability for us to do it, because it becomes a rights issue as much as anything in week 1 of the playoffs. So thanks to everybody for bearing with us in that and supporting it as well.
Yeah, definitely a shout out to JP Williams and company in Indianapolis. I mean, he was pivotal in us getting Darla Kirby for the sort of the reaction show, or the recap show of the selection committee, and obviously helping us get approval to broadcast a lot of those games. So definitely a great partnership with the NCAA. We look forward to more work with them in the future. Frank, I sort of alluded to it before. We focus on the positives, and we want to award the student athletes out there like the Jordan Wilcoxes of the world, and the John Smiths and so on. But there are every once in a while, almost every season, there's always some stuff that pops up that you're kind of like, D3 football isn't, has its own sometimes ups and downs, like the upper divisions, and we saw that a little bit with the situation with Occidental College having to cancel games, and their upper class, especially senior players, trying to deal with that, losing opportunities, very rare opportunities for them as they were wrapping up their football careers. The situation at Wheaton, as well as the kind of the untimely, sort of surprising letting go of Coach Kevin DeWall at Endicott, and the situation with D'Angelo Fulford at Mount Union, and sort of the how the university handled and responded to that. I mean, ultimately, probably not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but the sort of the silent treatment was unusual, particularly for a program as classy and as traditional as a Mount Union. So like we said, we focus on the positives, but at the same time, we try to be objective as we can. And so we have to, as pseudo journalists or whatever you want to call us, fans, friends, or whatever to Division III, it does make sense to point these out, because they have an impact on the student athletes of these programs and those that play them.
Yeah, we've taken on the chin at times, both in our organization here and D3Football.com, for reporting that less than exciting news when it comes across. And it becomes a question, what is our role in this Division III journalistic sense? And we pride ourselves, especially in the D3Football.com and right here as well on In the Huddle, to take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good, if you may, and that whole thing.
That's life.
It really is. But, what is our prime idea here, or an ideal? It is to present the student athletes at their finest. But there are moments where we have to basically tell you what's going on. It affects the game of football in some way, shape, or form. Some people may argue whether or not the Fulford situation, for instance, affected what was going on in the field ultimately, but it did eventually. They did not play him in the game. And so it is what it is, I guess, and we will all have our opinions on it, but our job is to present you what's going on, the news of Division III, and allow you to balance when you have the Jordan Wilcox stories out there in our region, and then those kinds of stories. You realize how lucky you are to have the Jordan Wilcoxes at the end of the day, that not everything is rainbows and lollipops and all that stuff around this division and this region necessarily. And so we're happy to get the support of most schools out there for what we do, and we understand that not everybody agrees, but we are going to do what we do. That's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel like we need to make any apologies for, trying to be objective as much as we can in our coverage. I mean, obviously the situation with Coach DeWall for me becomes a little more personal because, even though we didn't exactly overlap, he's only about 4 years older than I am. And, we both attended Hobart. He was a student athlete at Hobart. I remember seeing him play after I graduated, and I enjoyed watching, him, grow into one of the best coaches in the game. He mentored the highest ever drafted Division III football player ever. He, helped Hobart to a couple of Elite Eight appearances, and the way things sort of went down there. I think even if you are pro Endicott, you have to say like, wow, man, maybe that could have been handled better. I mean, but at the same time, I hope the new coach has nothing but success. There's a lot of young and promising student athletes there. It's obviously a great school, and we know that Kevin will land on his feet and do well. I had dinner with him last Sunday night in Tampa, and he seemed great and very positive, upbeat on his prospects, and we wish him well. But we're going to call him like we see him. Hopefully, people will respect us for that. Even if they don't like what we have to say. So that's just how it goes.
You got more takeaways than that, I think.
Yeah, one of the things we mentioned was this kind of expanded postseason pool with the advent of these additional bowl games from New England, as well as the sort of the Pennsylvania bowls. The ECACs actually they've shrunk a little bit. But man, there were some really competitive contests had there down at the University of Delaware, and we were really happy to help John and Megan over at the ECAC kind of do those bowl reveals with some extra commentary. Hopefully, we can continue to do that in the future. I think it's great that we're seeing more postseason opportunities for student athletes in Division III, particularly for the Eastern region. You don't really see that much outside the East, so. It's a good opportunity for these programs such as Ithaca and Salisbury and so on that want to make the NCAA playoffs have playoff types of games. And we saw some of the craziest plays ever, Frank, like, a kickoff from the 10-yard line and all sorts of stuff. So that was really a lot of fun and made this postseason that much more enjoyable, particularly when we got to see the Merchant Marine get their first postseason win in 14 seasons. So congrats to Coach Toop and the Mariners. You guys are A+ in our book, 10 out of 10.
Getting to see Coach Toop, do the post-game interview on the ECAC network there, actually I was just going to mention, was kind of the highlight of the bowl season for me personally. Knowing him all these years, you don't get to see, except sometimes on our show or behind the scenes from our show, his kind of softer side or his excited side. I think in that day we got to see that, or that night as the case was. We got to see it, and it was just refreshing to see it. Again, Coach Toop is Coach Toop. He's one of the, ice water in the veins guys as they come.
Old school.
Old school entirely, you're right. But at the same time, it's nice to see that softer side that you and I have gotten to know behind the scenes a little bit. But as a player, don't trust that softer side. It's there only once in a blue moon
get you
when
in
it
the
comes down
crosshairs.
to the team. Yeah, absolutely.
And to add on to that, this was coming off of an ESPN 3 televised Secretary's Cup game in the final week of the regular season, which hadn't happened in over 10 seasons. Also, kind of bringing that sort of mini Army-Navy game to the forefront and really giving the Coast Guard and the Merchant Marine a national platform and a international one in some respects, because so many of these guys are scattered throughout the world, and really highlights what's one of the best rivalries, one of the best, sort of YD3 types of games that's out there. And we're excited that, hey, I think we got 2 or 3 more at least of these Secretary's Cup games going to be on ESPN over the next few years. So that was a great new tradition, or an old tradition that's started anew in 2017.
So that's 4 by my count. Is there a 5th one, or am I miscounting?
Well, the 5th one is that, we at the end of the day, we are an East Region show, and, we have to give, credit to Brockport for ultimately, outlasting everybody else. In February, they'll get some hardware from the ECAC as the Lambert Cup champion, which is basically the best team in the East Region. Last year it was Alfred, who went 12-1. This year it's going to be Brockport, who ended up 12-1, giving a really solid game. At the end of the day, was there the goose egg on the scoreboard? Yes, but they could have taken points from field goals. But credit to Coach Mangione, he knew that he had to go for touchdowns instead. So they acquitted themselves well. We've seen a lot of Eastern teams, my alma mater included, go to these big time Division III powerhouses and not have very good games. And so the fact that they hung in there and they battled and played even in many, I've even heard people say for 2.5, maybe 3 quarters, with the defending national champions, really speaks well to the quality of football that we have in the East. I know that there's, we're eventually going to, keep that monkey on our back of having not made it to the Stagg Bowl, but I think there's East fans and Brockport fans have a lot to be proud of. And so, they'll probably be favorites. I mean, I know they're losing some really awesome guys to graduation, and those are going to be some big shoes to fill. But, when we look back on it at the end of the day, 2017 was a really great season for the Golden Eagles and for the East Region because of the run that they made.
Look, we made it to the Stagg Bowl, so at least something from the East Region made it to the Stagg Bowl. Come on, folks.
Exactly. Come on, man.
Brockport AD Eric Hart is on the committee. He's at the Stagg Bowl. So we have remnants of Stagg Bowl activity going on here still. But look, Brockport, we said it earlier, it was a surprise to us about just how well they did this season. We knew that they probably had some ability to challenge when they came back into the Empire 8, but it was a little delayed. And it shows you what good recruiting and patience and working out in that weight room and, just getting a really great staff behind you and everything else can do ultimately. And they really prospered here in 2017 and learned a lot. Vince Karras had told Pat Coleman yesterday in an interview that will air on Friday on D3Football.com's feed that you learn a lot more when you watch the losses than you do the wins at the end of the day. I think Brockport learned a lot about themselves last weekend. Yeah, it hurts to, have that game happen the way it did. Understood. But look, you're going to learn a lot about yourselves, what you lack, what you left on the table, and what you did really well as well, and that you keep along the way. And you watch that, and you're going to hear, I think Cole Parrish, who was the center for Mount Union, said it in the Around the Nation podcast extra that I did with Pat Coleman this morning that dropped. He said how they watched, Mount Union watched their loss to Mary Hardin-Baylor. He's watched it at least 10 times, he said. And again, I think they learn more about themselves than they learn about Mary Hardin-Baylor, because Mary Hardin-Baylor's got some changes throughout their team this year compared to last year. But Mount Union is kind of a very steady team in terms of what their schemes are, how they play their game, and everything else. What did they do wrong there? What did they leave on the table in that game, and how will it translate to changes they need to make for Friday night's game here? And I'm going to lead kind of to that as we begin to close out here. If you're watching this before Friday night at 7, then make sure to tune in to ESPNU and turn down the volume there, turn on our volume. I'll be in the sideline. I'm kind of practicing right now because it is windy and getting colder as the sun goes down here in the Roanoke Valley. Right now we're probably around 42 degrees-ish right now, and I'm not wearing a jacket. I will have a jacket on and some hot packs. Trust me on that. But it's going to be a cold one again here in Salem, and it's going to be a really good game, but it's the last one in Salem. And so we're going to be treated to, I think, a classic here in our last one. And all the teams and the coaches are excited about being here for the last one, at least for now, at least for 4 years, we know. And again, tune in listen to us. We'll have stories throughout about our time in Salem. And, my first one was literally overnight. I came here 8 hours straight drive down to Salem for the first time ever in 2007, 10 years ago. And that is when Wisconsin Whitewater won their first Stagg Bowl with Pierre Garçon in his final collegiate game on the other sideline. And it was a spectacle for me. I didn't know I would be still doing it 10 years later. And honestly, this show, the genesis of it, my involvement with it back with Eric Wren in 2008, sort of branched off the involvement with this game here in Salem, Virginia, because it just gave us a flavor for, hey, why can't we do broader coverage? You got this national scene here and everything else, and there's this demand for Division III coverage. And we did it for one league for 9 years, but we did dabble. We got the committee chair, et cetera, like you said, for years. And that's how this show came to be. And then to broaden it, as we've gotten a reputation throughout the years, good and bad, I'm sure, we've decided to, broaden it out. Once the Liberty League went to 6, at least for a couple of years, and we lost some of our best rating teams, Springfield, Merchant Marine, WPI, all three of them were great supporters of ours. We decided to follow them and branch out, and it worked. So, look, long story short, Salem is very special. It led to this show. Reward them by watching this game, and also reward them by coming down to visit and see what we're talking about, because it's not just about sports here. It's about a lot more. It's about just a great experience in a very growing area in the Roanoke Valley, Roanoke, Salem, etc. Come on down. You've got to come on down, actually, Mr. Baker. Or up in your case. And Lenny Reich, the SID from Mount Union, said, please bring us some warm weather.
Yeah, okay. Well, are we gonna sign off before we do what we've always done, Frank? I think every season, even though we may have ended up a few weeks away, we have predicted the Stagg Bowl. Maybe we can talk a little bit about other predictions, such as who might be on that All-American team Friday night that you could tune in around 5 o'clock to hear about that. So what do you think, Frank? When I know you're going to do your quick picks on Friday morning on D3Football.com, but can you give us a little sneak preview of who you think is going to take home the final, at least for now, Stagg Bowl Trophy ever presented at Salem?
Originally, and I said this at the podcast this morning, and it's in my quick hit as well, which will drop actually Thursday night. I believe this one, quick hits will come out this week. I originally was going to pick Mount Union in this game, and I've decided to change that based on looking at some of the figures. I'm a little bit weary about the Mount Union defense ultimately, and this is where I think the game comes down to. Mount Union's defense versus Mary Hardin-Baylor's offense. These seem to be the two weaknesses of each team's games that came out the last couple of weeks. And as such, I would say the defensive issues that we've seen in the first half, or the first, let's say, 35 minutes of each game for Mount Union. 24 points to Frostburg, 35 points, although that wasn't all defense. There was some other stuff that went on there for the game against Oshkosh. That, to me, is more concerning than the offensive line issues. The offensive line's got to give Robinson some time here on Friday night to throw that ball. But I think they're going to be able to keep the Mary Hardin-Baylor defense off the field long enough to keep their energy so they can do what they do, which is excel, and excel greatly. It's the best of the best out there. And Fanene and company, just ask Joe Germanario how good they are. He has nothing but accolades for them after kind of tasting the turf a few times at their hands last weekend. And so my answer is 21-17 in favor of Mary Hardin-Baylor, but it's going to take them basically to score early and then hold off Mount Union. I don't see a 35-point type comeback here, or a 25-point comeback, like we saw on Saturday to Oshkosh. What about you? What's your view on this game?
I like your prediction. I like your thought process. But I guess just for fun, I'll play devil's advocate, because I'm sure that there are Mount Union fans out there that are thinking, well, wait a minute. Last season, we barely lost to these guys, and it was with effectively a third-string quarterback who committed 2 or 3 turnovers. This year, we have a better quarterback leading the team. We've got a better receiving core. the defense, even though they can give up a lot of points, they also can create points and turnovers. So if I'm a Mount Union fan, it's also too sort of a history thing. It's like, we got this thing started. People have been against us. They've been giving us a hard time. They're going to come away with the win, with the chip on their shoulder, maybe with a late flurry, and they will upset the defending champions, let's say 27-24.
There you have it. So, James, final thoughts for this 2017 season as it gets a little noisier behind me. I guess that's them trying to tell us we need to pull the plug on this show, but final thoughts.
I think what the banner says right above us, it was the best season we've ever had. The numbers prove it. The fan reaction proves it. And this new, platform that we've found, well, really you found, I think proves it too. I think it sort of raises the bar as far as coverage goes. And we're not spring chickens anymore, but we want to push ourselves. We want to try to do better. And this was a really, for me, and I think for you also, it really sort of said, hey, you know what, we're doing the right thing here. We're onto something here. This is going well. And we'll keep coming back as long as there's an interest. I don't know, maybe we'll be watching In the Huddle when we're old and gray, like Frank. But hey, it was a great year. It's certainly one that will go down in sort of our little history books as a turning point, and hopefully we can keep it going.
One of the biggest compliments we received this season was actually from the D3Football.com show we did on Saturday. D2Football.com's proprietor had reached out to our friend Pat Coleman to say what a phenomenal look it was, the coverage we did, which is basically this same setup on Saturday, afternoon and night, and asked, hey, what kind of technology do you use? Anybody that's seen us pull in. Yeah, anybody's seen me pull in with basically a table to elevate the computer and a tripod and camera, and that's about it. You're like, well,
not fancy,
this can't be
but
for real.
It works.
No, exactly. Yeah. We get the coverage. We bring the games, really the games to you, or the post games to you in various ways, and then also the interviews and everything else. It was a great compliment to hear, even though we laughed to ourselves about just how little technology there really is to this. But that's between us and whoever's still watching this at this point. But it's been a great season. It's been enjoyable. And honestly, getting to see you every week has been a pleasure for me because, look, normally we're just talking back and forth and doing a Sunday show in the history.
Text message.
Yeah, exactly. This makes it more real. I wish I was able to, have you with me at some of those games throughout this season during the travel. We're working on that. Yeah. We're going to get you there sooner or later. And your fans want you there as well, JB. But
my fans, right?
You have fans, you really do. But
right.
My point here is this: it's been a more complete season in a lot of different ways, and it's what drove us and motivated us to even continue into the playoffs as much as we have. We didn't plan on that, and we kind of just said, "Hey, why not?" And so we continued, and you can see we're here at week 16, which is the Stagg Bowl. Still bring you a season finale at this point. Make sure you watch the game. And if you're watching this after the game, you'll see who was right, who was wrong one more time. But, JB, you are always a pleasure to work with. I will see you in January and February when I'm down in Orlando, and we can kind of put together the best of, worst of, I guess, on this show. There's so many clips that we didn't run because of how much we screwed up and everything else. Yeah, but we won't talk about that right now and bore the folks more than we have already. Just want to say love you, buddy. Thank you for everything, and love you folks for tuning in throughout this season. It's been a great one. Congratulations to all the award winners out there. Congratulations to Brockport for what they did and the rest of the teams that made the playoffs. And and also Jordan Wilcox for even taking us one step further here with the Gagliardi Trophy finalist position, and Brian McGoffin did a great job pulling that together as well at Springfield. There's so many things to say, so many people to congratulate, but we're going to take some time here for our families and ourselves, especially after I leave Salem, to have a great holiday season, and we wish you happy holidays, folks. Thanks for joining us. As always, comment to us and reach out to us throughout the off season. We'll be around.